evening and welcome to this special edition of India Business Hour. Our top story this evening, cautious on short-term growth, firm on fiscal prudence and positive on the impact of demonetization in the long term. That, in essence, are the highlights of the economic survey tabled in Parliament on the eve of the Union budget. I spoke to the man of the moment, the Chief Economic Advisor, Arvind Subramanian, earlier today. Here's a slice of that conversation. Remember, it's a 14-chapter survey, over 300 pages. Here's Arvind Subramanian's prescription for growth.
It would be unfair to say that this is an economic survey that merely talks about the implications and the impact of demonetization. There's plenty more that it does talk about. If I could start by asking you about your outlook as far as growth is concerned, wouldn't it be fair for me to say that your outlook on growth today is more cautious than optimistic?
Well, I mean, I don't know in terms of words, but certainly what we've said is that relative to the baseline that both the CSO and we had forecast for this year, growth is going to be about 1/4 to 1/2 percentage point less. You know, that means, yes, more cautious relative to the baseline, yeah.
But talking about growth projections for the year ahead as well, for FY18, you're projecting 6.75 to about 7.5%. At this point in time, given what you see as both the local factors as well as the great uncertainty that we see in the global environment, do you believe that perhaps the lower end is more realistic a target?
See, firstly, remember that the fact that, you know, this year's forecast is a bit down because of the factors we've outlined also has an impact on next year's forecast, because if you start at you know, if the starting point is weaker, you know, obviously the next year is also going to be affected by that. Now, whether it will be at the lower end or the upper end of the range, as you said, will depend upon a lot of things, and that's why we give a range. There is a lot of uncertainty. There's uncertainty about, you know, whether there's any lingering effect of the demonetization on the domestic side, also about what the follow-up actions will be taken. And then on the international side, huge uncertainty. You saw today, you know, action, executive order against the H-1B thing. But more broadly, you know, we don't know how oil prices are going to behave. We don't know, you know, more broadly, you know, could trade tensions escalate? Because currency movements are going to be very important. The dollar has been rising, the Chinese currency has been declining. If that happens, East Asian currencies decline with it. What does that do to our exports? And of course, the resurgence of medium-term protectionism. You know, all these are uncertainties, and so to reflect that, we have a range. And, you know, it's very difficult to say whether you'll be at the upper or the lower end of the range.
You've listed out several of the challenges that the economy faces, both domestically as well as globally. But if I were to ask you to prioritize for us the key risks that you see today, perhaps both on the upside as well as the downside to the projection that you've made so far.
On the upside, I think that if you look at export data for the most recent quarters, there has been an uptick in both goods and services. You know, from negative growth, we're in positive territory for manufactured goods, non-oil manufactured goods. And that reflected in turn the fact that the world economy had started to recover. Now, if next year, as the IMF has forecast, world growth is going to be higher than this year, there is some upside potential to exports, which will have spillover effects on private investment as well.
But there's also the rising threat of protectionism and a very real threat of deglobalization.
Exactly. Now you have to see, even on the external side, there's a short term which could be positive because of what I just said. You know, demand goes up in the US because of a fiscal expansion. Other countries, their currencies decline. Therefore, you know, the Japanese outlook is looking better. German outlook is looking better as a result. But balanced by, you know, resurgence of protectionism. So we have to balance all these factors, and then we'll see how it goes. The protectionism is something that I think is a much more also a medium-term challenge, because, you know, this retreat from globalization, it seems to be very real, seems to be kind of pervasive and broad-based across the board. So it's something we have to be very watchful about.
I'll come to, you know, the export picture as well as globalization in just a bit, but the need for a stimulus at this point in time, given where we are today, private consumption has been impacted because of demonetization, spending continues to be led by the government, credit offtake continues to be anemic, we continue to be faced with the challenge that you pointed out in your previous survey, which is the challenge of private sector balance sheets which remain broken. In that situation, is there a need for a stimulus?
Right. So as you rightly said, the economy has been, in a sense, driven by consumption, private consumption, and government consumption and investment. And exports and investment have been relatively weak. But the export picture is changing. That's one thing. On the other hand, we're hoping the monsoon will be good and farm incomes will improve. So you might get some improvement to private consumption as well. And then the whole role of the government is, as always, with a kind of slight slowdown because of demonetization. On the one hand, you want government to compensate for that, but on the other hand, you also have on the other side all the considerations that you want to maintain fiscal prudence, you want to maintain the credibility you've acquired by saying you're going to stick to a certain path. So you have to balance these considerations. So that in turn is going to determine whether you should have, some people want expansion. Some people
Do you want expansion?
Some people want aggressive consolidation.
Do you want expansion?
No, that we have to see tomorrow. We'll see what the budget will do.
But do you think there is need for expansion today? Because while you talk about how India must not embrace fiscal activism, which seems to have worked for advanced economies, you also talk about sticking to the path of fiscal consolidation. But then you also say that the operational framework designed in 2003 will need to be modified for fiscal policy for the India of today and the India of tomorrow. How should we reconcile what you said in those chapters with what you're saying now?
No, I think it's completely consistent. I think that the experience shows that, fiscal indiscipline is bad, right? That's obvious. It also led to our two crises. So from that, avoiding fiscal indiscipline, but that doesn't necessarily translate into, steady consolidation or aggressive consolidation. The choice between those will be determined very much by the circumstances, and we will see what happens tomorrow, what choices are made.
What do the circumstances today tell you the need of the hour is?
The need of the hour is to balance the need for government to not take away demand with the need to maintain credibility and reduce the debt, continue the path of fiscal consolidation. It's that balance that needs to be struck always.
So in this balance, what can be done as far as demand contraction is concerned? I mean, which is real, specifically post demonetization?
See, the exact answer I cannot give you because you'll get it tomorrow. But what I want to share, what we shared with you in the survey, is the thinking that goes behind it.
Speaking of the thinking, I don't want to dwell too much on demonetization, but you've done an analysis of what it means in the short term, clear pain, and perhaps you're the first from within the government that's acknowledged it as openly as you have. In the long term, and I quote to you what the survey says, while you call it a tax on black money, you also say to really quantify the decision and the magnitude of the long-term changes, it will take several years to understand the impact on illicit transactions. So you're not really clear of what demonetization will finally do for the Indian economy.
No, I see. Look, there are potential long-term benefits, but by definition long-term means that the evidence will come in not today, tomorrow, but months and years down the road. But we also, we're not ducking our responsibilities here. There is a section in the chapter which says what are the markers of success. In this case, there can be you can identify clear markers of success. One, what's going to happen to the cash to GDP ratio going forward? Two,
at 9% post-demonetization, I understand now.
No, but again, remember it's long term. We need to sustain lower levels over a sustained period of time. One, number of taxpayers, how much income is reported to taxpayers. Real estate prices, what happens over time. Indirect tax registration, what happens over time. So this is a case where you can lay down markers. You can even say, this is what happened before demonetization. We'll track these, and the evidence will come in over time. But the point is that because it's long-term benefits, you can't make a judgment today. That's intrinsic to saying it's long-term.
So in the short term, has it achieved some of the objectives that the government stated it should achieve?
So, I mean, provide some data on that. We've talked about the short-term costs, but we show evidence that digitalization has picked up quite substantially, partly because of follow-up government action, and also there is some sign, at least temporarily, that real estate prices come down. But these are still too early to make any definitive judgments on.
Given everything that you've spoken of, how concerned would you be on the revenue picture?
This year or next year?
Next year.
Next year, as we spell out in the survey, there are 2 or 3, I think, important challenges next year, right? One is that we are not going to get the same bonanza from oil excise, because this year we raised it. Next year we're not going to get that bump from, if anything, indirect tax revenue GDP could go down a little bit. Second, remember, next year is going to be the first year of implementing the GST.
Yeah. July 1?
July, we'll have to wait and see. But the point is that initially there will be teething problems. So I am absolutely convinced that in the long run, GST will increase the tax to GDP ratio. But in the first year, there will be implementation challenges. So one has to be prepared for that. And remember, both for the center and for the states, and the center has promised compensation. So
speaking of compensation, I mean, you're factoring in a 14% growth as far as taxes are concerned. Exactly. So, I mean, how concerned would you be about that?
That's why the fiscal outlook for next year we have to be cautious about for these reasons, and that has to be that has to feed into the the budget deficit target and what we are planning for.
I want to talk to you about some ideas that you specifically, very quickly, on addressing the NPA situation. And this is something that you spoke about in the previous survey as well. You clearly believe that things haven't worked as per the government's expectations. You think there is a need for an out-of-the-box idea. I don't know whether you mean a bad bank necessarily when you talk about a public asset reconstruction agency or rehabilitation agency. Has there been any formal discussion on that?
Yeah, see, I think first we clearly say that existing solutions have not, been as fruitful and productive as we expected or wanted them to be. So the problem is huge, very difficult, intractable in some ways. So we must search for new solutions, and the government is very aware of that. We've had discussions on this. So we will be looking at all options going forward.
Is it an option that's being considered at this point?
Governments are open to all possible solutions.
On another option, the Universal Basic Income Scheme, and you've talked about the fiscal implications of that, 4 to 5% of GDP, but you also say that it'll mean doing away with other schemes. This cannot be an add-on. Yeah. Is this a serious option on the table? Can we expect any forward movement, perhaps, in the short term?
See, I think the time is right to discuss this idea because it's a important and radical new idea. Because it can eliminate, all the things that go with poverty. But also there are lots of challenges to this, So converting an idea into, policy reality means overcoming these challenges for which you need to, India is such a big country, so many things we have.
So it's only discussion at this point in time.
We have to discuss this, yeah.
Final question, and this was an idea that you brought up in the previous budget as well, the excess capital of the Reserve Bank of India and what to do with it. Have you managed to gain any momentum on getting the government to see merit in that thought, getting the Reserve Bank to see merit in that thought, especially post demonetization?
Yeah, let's see how it works out over the next few months.
Can we expect to hear something on that front?
Let's see how things pan out.
So today, more confident about the state of the Indian economy? Would the challenges internally be more difficult to deal with, or the external challenges be more difficult?
I think all challenges are difficult. I think we have to meet all of them.